Pagoo by Holding Clancy Holing. Section 2. Shifting tides and changing hides. Pagoo knew little about his sea, though old instinct tried to tell him. "It's big, son," he said. Big? To Pagoo there was no bigness to it. Wasn't it the whole world? And on some nights there were fireworks, the whole world burning with weird cold flames. Such displays usually began with animals small as pinheads. When disturbed by sudden water movements, their bodies took on a strangely luminescent glow. Then insect-sized copepods caught the urge and twinkled, and other creatures after them, glow on glow, with big jellyfish lighting up at last like pale round moons. The ghostly fire would spread and build until the sea shimmered with brightness, and huge waves fairly blazed. From the blaze a few cold sparks might tingle in Pagoo's fuzzy places. There the fairy lights would spangle Pagoo, and crystal ornaments, a most natural thing in this most wonderful world. But as to a certain push-pull of water, not wind, not wave, tides, said old pal. It's only the tides. For 6 long hours a flood tide slowly bulges out of the sea and creeps upon the land. Flood tides crowds wide beaches into narrow strips and fills lagoons until boats can float and sail. Then, for 6 hours more, the ebb tide runs floodwaters back to the sea again. Lagoons drain away until anchored boats settle down on the tide flats and sit there, smack dab in the mud. Sandy beaches spread wider, their rocks break the surface and seem to rise like monsters rearing. Pools are left along shore to gleam like little lakes, yet these puddles hold no fish. Lake water. When you taste it, the water is very salty. The saltiness grows more bitter as the hot sun dries and shrinks the puddles. Those tide pools may be as small as a bowl or as big as a duck pond, but once the tide has ebbed away, it begins to return. It floods back to the tide pools and the small animals stranded there. The tide ebb and flow never ends. Already several days old, Pagoo never had been driven ashore. His plankton crowd had somehow held to the open sea. But on one blue-black night, when all the world was flaming with sea fire, wave, wind, and tide almost killed Pagoo. At high tide a strong wind pushed the fire waves into billows, rolled billions of plankton creatures into them, and charged toward land. On the crest of flood tide, Pagoo and his glowing neighbors met the coast. Tons of tiny animals were caught up in surging spray and hurled higher than a house. Splattered with foam against the rocky cliffs, thousands of them stuck and glowed there dimly. Dry air soon put out their little fires, and they flaked away and vanished on the whirling wind. Millions of others were rolled forward, tossed and slapped upon the sandy beach. When water drained from them, they flopped across. Great boulders of sand grains flickered faintly and slid off. They died in the canyon between the boulders before the next waves came. Next morning, after the ebb tide, sandhoppers ate them. Out from the sand, with a skip and a dizzy jump, these sand fleas leaped to feast on the pale, dead plankton animals. Pagoo was not eaten. He did not dry out. But old instinct had kept murdering. Close, mighty close, too close that time. As Pagoo washed hard against the cliffs, Yet water formed slick cushions under him and slid him down the rocks. Time and again he was dumped on the beach, but water swirled him, slid him back down the sloping sand to his sea again. Pagoo was safe, though he almost had died of wave shock. But wasn't he the son of two-fisted, fight-loving hermit crabs? Well, he was supposed to be, but at this stage even his own parents would not have known him. Pagoo was not two-fisted. He had no claws at all, not even legs, nothing but feelers and fuzzy things sticking out. As yet he was only a promise of becoming a hermit crab, as a caterpillar is a promise of a butterfly. But old pal was right there. Sure, you are just a mite afloat on the sea, but buck up, you are a promise. Your billions of ancestors have handed down your toughness. You can't be knocked out too easily. Yes, life in this nice salty sea could be dangerous, but old pal advised him, "Eat, son. Bring up your weight. Eat plenty of meat. Go chase that water flea." So Pagoo hunted wiggly game among the plankton, game that could be seen even by you, if you squinted. Of course, the wiggling things he chased were at least as small as himself. He had found that most creatures bigger than he was tried to feast on him. In this game of run for your life, you could easily be a goner. "Keep on growing, son," urged old pal. You wouldn't have noticed much growth, but Pagoo knew he was bigger. As though outgrowing his clothes, he felt overstuffed. "And that's dangerous," said instinct. "Something will catch you. You're too slow. What will happen next? Why, you'll just naturally burst wide open." And Pagoo did. If the skin of Pagoo had been rubbery soft like worm skin, it would have stretched as he grew. But Pagoo's skin was not soft. It was a tough plastic crust, for he was a crustacean. Because crustaceans such as shrimp, crawfish, crabs, and lobsters have crusty skins, they must molt to grow larger. They must burst their coverings and crawl out of them. Crustaceans molt and come out larger, soft and wrinkled. Soon they fill out the form crusty coating again. This happens time after time as they grow. Pagoo's brittle armor burst open across his back. He bent double, lashed his tail, wiggled and bucked to pull all those pesky points and joints out of their plastic prisons. This molting was almost as much trouble as being hatched all over again, but at least he had shed his old skin. It drifted off in the sea like a moss-tiny wing on a breeze, and Pagoo was left soft and new all over. It felt good to be free, to stretch out and expand, and suddenly he was hungrier than ever. It was easier to bring food near his mouth parts now, for he had an extra pair of fuzzy new oars with which to stir the sea soup.